If you would have asked me, could I imagine being strung out on meth? Couldn't imagine it. Not in a million years. You think you have it under control, and then one day, I came to realize, oh no, it has control over me.
You know, I think there's only two reasons why people use drugs. They use drugs to feel good, and they use drugs to feel better. You know, so many of my patients who have HIV have been trying to feel better all their lives.
The first time I ever engaged with substances was in high school. My friends had a party and we were in the garage and there was some tequila and there was some pot and they were like, try some of this.
At the age of 16, I started with pills. I think about like 24, 25, cocaine.
There was a culture, both in college and in the Reserve Officer Training Corps, to drink.
A good friend of mine, he was like, hey, try this, pop. And I tried ecstasy for the first time.
I started to do meth, and I started to lose weight, and I started to feel like I was coming alive, you know?
All of a sudden, I felt attractive and funny and popular, and I could dance.
I did throw up and I did pass out, but it did not deter me. I continued.
I knew that day that it was gonna be a problem. I knew it.
I define addiction as once I start something, I can't stop. And I go to 100 real quick.
The most common substances that people use are still tobacco and alcohol.
And some people develop a problematic relationship with one or more substances.
We have this saying that there are the 4 C's of addiction: loss of control, compulsion, craving, and consequences.
I think I noticed my own addiction. It was when I started smoking crack in 1987. It just got out of hand.
So I went from being a highly paid corporate assistant to being a drug dealer and a pimp.
I ended up living in my car. Sure enough, my car got towed, and I ended up homeless. And from there, my curiosity of substances became a curiosity of needles.
I was a cheater, liar, manipulator. I manipulated and lied to my family.
When you're super high, your ability to rationalize and make good decisions about what you're doing sexually is greatly inhibited. We'll just leave it at that. For me, HIV and addiction are inextricably linked.
When I took that hit, I didn't care about anything. Nothing bothered me. You know, I wasn't afraid of anything in the world. And I should have been, because I stopped having safe sex really quickly.
I remember all of us getting high and putting needles down on the counter or whatever, and then just going back later and grabbing one and then using it again, you know? I really, truly believe I got HIV from a needle.
It was the first HIV test I'd ever taken. Before they even closed the door, the woman said positive. And I said, what do you mean positive? She said, your test results came back and you're HIV positive. And I remember I just kind of stared at her.
He told me I had a year to live. He said, looking at your T cells, you have a 300 and something T cells, you got about a year to live.
I haven't forgotten how scary that was and how hopeless, helpless, and alone we felt.
And then the shame stepped in. I'm a drug addict and I'm HIV positive, so I guess all bets are off and we're just gonna do this until we die.
There's a lot of shame throughout society in terms of their view of people who use drugs, right? And it happens to align very closely with the shame that a lot of my patients feel who have HIV about their HIV disease or how they contracted their HIV disease.
And with shame, there's guilt, there's low self-esteem, there's feelings of not being worthy.
Once you're in it, it's very hard to pull yourself out of it.
Pretend nothing happened, and that's the best way to cope with this sad news. So I just I keep on using crystal meth.
I was hitting it hard, like I was doing a lot of drugs. I was selling a lot of drugs. I went in and out of prison all the time. I went to federal and state prison.
I spent a whole year out on the street after finding out that I was HIV positive, still using and without taking any meds. How am I gonna have medical adherence as a homeless person who gets my shit stolen? I get my shit stolen every other day.
I stopped taking my antivirals. And even though I was told, you can't miss a dose, right?
Things get really bad really quick with me. I always end up in intensive care. It's always the same thing. I get there and I wake up and they're like washing me, and I'm just lined up with all these wires and tubes. And I keep saying to myself, how did I get here? How did I get to this place? And they're like, you have 88 T cells, George. They go, if you don't change this, you're gonna die. And I would always say, I'm gonna change. And I would never, ever change.
I was on this path of self-destruction, and I knew it, and I didn't care.
I actually caused an accident that killed my friend. And I knew that morning, that I'm standing at the corner of an intersection that on the left, I'm going to continue being a drug addict. And it's just ironic that on my right side, it was the CASTRO Country Club, a facility and a space for people to stay sober.
Right off the bat, I said, I'm not interested in abstinence because I like this too much. And that's when I first heard about this term called harm reduction.
Essentially, it's a philosophy around recognizing that we will never get rid of all of the risks related to something, but we can figure out ways to make it safer. So in this current COVID-19 era, masks are harm reduction. When it comes to drugs, we think about using a sterile syringe to prevent transmission of HIV or hepatitis C or other viral hepatitises.
Abstinence is just another tool in the harm reduction toolbox. It isn't something opposite. It's just another thing. You could choose to do that. You could do a full abstinence where you avoid using all substances, or you have targeted abstinence.
I avoid crystal meth altogether because for me, there's no way to just do a little bit. And then with alcohol, I'm working with a counselor right now to determine what might be the best.
For me, I had to say goodbye to everything up until that point. And I went to rehab with a backpack, literally a backpack.
And I got like a highly visible position in recovery, but I never really told the truth. I didn't deal with the reason that I used, and I relapsed.
You know, there are all these triggers, all these things that could put me right back into the same mindset that got me to use in the first place.
We have so many patients who've had adverse childhood experiences. They've grown up with physical, sexual, emotional abuse.
And growing up in a Catholic household, being the oldest son in a Catholic household and being gay in a really rough neighborhood, in a rough lowrider Mexican neighborhood, it was really hard.
I never talked about being molested or abused by these men, you know, when I was younger. And I think that plays a big part on why I keep using.
I thought nobody could ever hear the things that I'm telling you today and I don't think they could stay with me in that room and like me. And so I felt alone, and so I would use so that I wouldn't feel alone anymore.
I think what is most deadly for people that use drugs is shame, stigma, and isolation. And what's needed is the opposite of that isolation, right? So connection, compassion, open-heartedness, and understanding. People who use substances have been integral in the fight against AIDS.
Syringe access in particular, we owe entirely to people who use drugs.
We had AIDS activists. We had ex-users who'd been in recovery for a long time. We had a bunch of anarchists. We had a bunch of witches. You know, it was all people who are kind of used to not going along with the mainstream.
They were people that loved people who used drugs and just came out into their communities.
And I don't think I ever really experienced the true meaning of community until I was sober.
I started meeting these amazing people, and I started meeting these people who were like having as much fun as I thought I was having on drugs.
There's this thing about recovery where generally folks are guided there by seeing other folks recover.
Now I'm the one who is there to support these other guys who are struggling. And I also get something in return. So it's this back and forth, and that's a life-sustaining and affirming thing, you know? So it's like the most important thing to me now.
And we talk about issues of depression and anxiety. We talk about substance use. We talk about HIV/AIDS. We talk about the issues that directly impact my life.
Part of the process of getting sober was for me to really sit in my struggle. Being in recovery in the group, like in rooms and with people, allowed me to sit through that pain and not be alone.
I had to get rid of that anger. I had to get rid of the lying, just and become truthful.
Since 2009, since I've contracted AIDS, being honest about it and embracing what I really am means that I'm not ashamed anymore.
I don't want to die anymore, you know, I want to live. And so I'm really excited about, you know, getting myself together.
Being sober is not always beautiful and pink sky, you know, butterflies, flying flowers smells really nice. You know, there's ups and downs in our lives, you know, even during sobriety.
And it's difficult now because, you know, I don't have that kind of fun that I used to have. I don't have that feeling that I used to have, but I traded that for something else.
I am most proud of the fact that I love myself. After decades of not knowing how to, and that was the therapy I had been searching for in a needle.
And I can be as I am, you know? Me getting HIV, me being in recovery, all of that is a big part of me.
I hope I can leave that as a legacy of keeping it real, not hiding myself because I'm ashamed. And I hope I can help other people to live in that way, transparent, true to themselves, true to their communities, true to their higher power, true to who they are. I hope that I can leave that.